position on that steering committee. And that was my first entryway, and it wasn't intended to be into activism, but that's what led to it. That's how I ended up hearing about Picture the Homeless. But from that, after working with Picture the Homeless, I found the Left Forum, of which used to be called the Marxist Forum in New York, where a lot of progressive academics got together and decided to create this forum and be a voice for folks who were thinking differently about a different world. I got involved in that as a member of Picture the Homeless. I work with a philanthropic group in New York called North Star Fund, who does philanthropy a little bit different. They take activists and community members to make the decisions on who gets funded. So before I came here on Tuesday, I was sitting in the North Star Fund office reading about 90 proposals from social justice groups in New York City and helping to make a decision on who is going to receive funding to do their work. I work with the human rights organization, as you heard Garson say, called the National Economic and Social Rights Initiative, called NESRI. They put the work that I do in a human rights frame and the work that I do with other organizations and frame it around a human rights issue, right? It's a lot more powerful when you talk about these issues as a human rights issue, right? There are obligations that we should receive just for the fact that we were human. And if governments aren't living up to them, you have to frame that in a way that it resonates with folks. Because the one thing we're good about in the States is talking about and understanding is civil rights. We have a hard time in the United States with human rights. We just don't seem to get it. It's problematic with us, and we work hard with groups like NESRI to make that social change. And then probably where my passion lies in all of this work is with an organization called Take Back the Land, which is, I helped co-found the national movement. After learning about this organization as a member of Picture the Homeless, I went down to Miami in 2009 with 3 other members of Picture the Homeless and learned about work that was happening in Miami. Met the gentleman who was one of the leaders of that organization, Max Rameau, and he and I spoke at a conference in Baltimore, Maryland in 2009 and decided that we should take this work national. And today a lot of the work I do is based on the teachings of Max, meeting people like your Professor Garson Hunter, a lot of progressive academics. I have the opportunity of working with people like David Harvey in New York City. Neil Smith, who recently passed away, was probably the quote-unquote mentor in my life and my work that I do. He was the first one to forge the collaboration with me in academia and students, and encouraging his students to work with community-based organizations. So a lot of what is developing between Garson and myself and some of the students here was based on what I've learned through Neil's teachings and trying to put that to practice, collaborating with students in more progressive minds. So I want to take you, and I'm going to integrate my talk a little bit with a little bit of video to sort of kind of bring you on a thread of how I got to where I am today. So my first entryway into social justice, as I said, was with the group Picture the Homeless. And that was inspiring to me because that was the first time that I saw people who were homeless lifted up and having a voice in themselves, right? Not having somebody serve or do things for us. It was people speaking for themselves. And after we went to Miami and learned from Max Rameau, we come back in March 2009 and took over a building in New York City. And it was the first time anybody had taken over properly like that publicly, probably since the 70s. The Young Lords was a Hispanic gang from East Harlem. Probably was the last group to do that. They took over a hospital in New York called Lincoln Hospital and sort of created a feeding program, like bringing milk and fresh food to poor people from poor communities. So they would hijack food trucks, make the food trucks go to Lincoln Hospital, and they would have all of these kids from poor communities sit down and have a healthy breakfast, right? It was a change. So after we took over the building the first time, folks, members of the former Young Lords would call me at Picture the Homeless. Hey, nobody's been doing this work for a long time. I want to meet you. Meet me at Union Square Park, 2 o'clock in the morning. I thought these folks were crazy. But these calls kept coming. Black Panthers were calling. The city got excited behind this type of action. Nobody had done it for a long time. And one of the key people I met was Mark Nason, who's a professor of African American Studies at Fordham University in New York. And he had written a couple of books on communism in Harlem in the 30s, right? There were rent strikes, there was community organizing going on during the Depression when people were struggling. And this is the education I got on the fly. I had no interest in this stuff in the past, but all of these folks gravitated towards me and just gave me access to this wealth of information. So, taking what we learned from Max, and the first time we took over the building from Picture the Homeless, we made a mistake. We thought that building was owned by the city. It happened to have been owned by a religious institution, but it was a challenge. It taught us how we could actually challenge an establishment and really get our point across. Through that action, none of us were arrested. I had some lunch with a little meal with students earlier, and I was telling them the process of going through the police negotiation, which gained the trust of police, and Picture the Homeless as an organization, nonviolent, and their work was put upon in a nonviolent way, and people had a level of respect for us. That respect changed or caused some tensions in police departments when about 4 months later, we took over a lot owned by J.P. Morgan Chase in New York City that was between two multi-story public housing projects, but it had been sitting vacant for 28 years. And it really enraged the community, enraged us, because we said this space could have been used for a park. You really couldn't put a building in it. Nobody's going to purchase any building between two public housing units. So why not show good faith and donate this piece of space to the community? They didn't want any parts of it, so we decided to take it over. So we collaborated, and a lot of the messaging that I'm doing today is about collaboration. And we work with an art group out of Brooklyn called Not an Alternative, who takes social justice messaging and turns it into art. So as we do this, I'm going to take you through part of the video. It's a little bit long, but I will get links to all of this video to Professor Hunter if you want to look at the full, but we'll start it off now and we'll look at a little piece of this.
We're Not an Alternative, a nonprofit arts organization based in Brooklyn whose mission aims to integrate art, activism, technology, and theory to affect popular understandings of events, symbols, and history. So we collaborate with community groups around campaigns, building spectacle with props and interventions and events and websites and videos, things like that.
So what right now are you doing?
We're making props.
This is Frank Morales, an Episcopal priest in New York who's been squatting
So these
30 years in the
represent
building.
self-determination on the part of homeless people and others who are tired of empty promises and are determined to create the housing for themselves through direct action. So what these props will be used for is an action on the 23rd, this coming Thursday, sponsored by Picture the Homeless and other friends and allies and people around the city and homeless people who will be taking a vacant lot, moving on a vacant lot, and creating a place to call home.
I see progress in pink healing. I see progress in Ricky's feeling. In the sun setting at night. In the moon getting right. In autumn leaves. Yeah. I guess that's what they said. This is what they said. They said to me, I see progress in pink peeling. Yeah, and I like leaky ceilings.
So for this collaboration, we're teaming up with friends to architect a tent city and stage an intervention on the urban landscape. So we're dressing up as a film production crew, shooting a music video. That's our cover story for the deployment and installation of the tent city in a vacant lot. Becca Economopoulos with PTH Productions. This is our model today, Lena. We loved her headshots and saw some demo tapes. Looks fantastic. So we're going to be shooting a music video today called A Place to Call Home. Right? How are you feeling?
I'm great. I'm excited to be here.
Do you need anything? We got food set up. We're probably going to start shooting in like 10 minutes.
That's great. I think I'm ready. Yeah.
10-minute call, guys? Sound good? Okay.
There is a security force that watches over the space on a regular basis, and they're infatuated with this model on the street.
We're ready for you.
So the question is, do I want to sit in jail with my
I see progress in pink peeling. I see progress in leaky ceilings.
I ordered a dog to be with me in a music video. I'm hoping that dog is going to arrive at some point because he's an important part of my dance scene.
In the sun setting at night, in the moon getting bright, in autumn leaves, yeah. I guess that's what they said. This what they said. They said to me.
What do you think about how the video is going so far?
I think it's good. I really like the concept, the model, and the fence, and the way in which the fence can't hold her because she's just so beautiful. It's a really good video.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's good. It's good. You know, the whole place called home is.
Right. I really like the song too. I haven't heard it yet, but I think it's a really good song.
So, my cue to start the stage production with the backdrop that you're moving is action. And my cue to stop, in case we need to stop the shoot, is cut.
All right, action.
They said they called the beach when the surf meets the sand. For you and me, it's a shame game.
Who gave you the right to open that up? No. I told you, and I made you this one, and I tell you something. You don't tell me you want to open it. I don't care how many times you're gonna be here. You don't have the right to open this over here. I want to call the police right now.
We're gonna put it back. Alright.
Because you don't have permission to do that. You don't call me. You don't see. When I tell you, when I meet to you, I let you know I'm the super. Why you don't tell me you want to do
My
that?
producer told me.
I don't care. You produce it. I don't care about the producer.
Call Harlem. Would you call Harlem in the production company and tell them to get here?
That's us. That's
Our arts nonprofit is based in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, one of the epicenters of the housing bubble. We got a rezoning in 2005 that led to what they were estimating to be a 25% population increase, 40,000 new people in less than a decade, primarily in luxury condominiums. So you see the landscape here peppered with cranes that don't move. They've been languishing for months on end. Half of these places have been foreclosed, projects are bankrupt, and people's homes are being foreclosed. People are bankrupt. So why don't we match the people with the places, right? It seems to make a lot of sense.
Cops.
The police are arriving, they're pulling up right now. See?
What are you going to say to them?
I'm actually going to defer to Rob from Picture the Homeless, who's the police liaison. He's going to tell the truth that we're here with Picture the Homeless, installing a tent city.
You're telling me it belongs to Chase. You don't work for Chase. You don't.
So that's, I'll just say quickly, as I was talking at dinner tonight, that interaction lasted about a minute with the police, and I had formed a relationship from our first takeover with the Deputy Inspector Caban from 2-5. So as those two were flexing their muscles, I let them talk for a little bit, for about a minute, and I said, you know what, I don't want to talk to you guys anymore, I'll only talk to Deputy Inspector Caban. They bring him to the scene and a bunch of other guys, we call them the brass or the white shirts in New York, means you got higher level police, and he comes right in and shakes my hand. The first thing I do is introduce him to Amy Zimmer from New York Metro, one of the reporters we know is pretty progressive in the city, so that's like a checkmate. The other thing, and we were talking a little bit about how police negotiation starts. When the police come, there's been a history in New York of people stepping back from the police. The one thing I like to do is step towards the police. It sends a message. The message is, we took this, so you can't negotiate over here because we're running this. And when you want to put up those metal cages, you're going to put them out in the middle of the street, and you and I will stand in them together. So the message is, we're in this together. So we need to figure out a solution together. It's not the police against the activists. It's us together from the community trying to figure out a solution. And it changes everything. It changes how police react to you. I think, to have the press on the scene and introduce them to the press know you, it stops everything and neutralizes all the oppression that they might put on you. But we can talk more about that, and I'm sure Carson will have some conversations with me about that. It's been pretty successful. And Occupy Our Homes, a group in the States, when they did a December 6th Day of Actions, of which Take Back the Land trained a lot of them for, but I had nothing to do with the New York group that was taking over the house. At the last minute, they called me to be the police negotiator on that particular day because they just knew they were going to have 1,000 people in the street and they needed somebody who could interact with the police. And to make a long story short, on that day, 1,000 people in the middle of Brooklyn, nobody got arrested. So it says something about the process that we use to negotiate with police in New York. So from that, you can see that we started to get active as an organization to Picture the Homeless. But at the same time, there was a collaboration between Max Rameau, who was with Take Back the Land in Miami, and myself, and figuring out how we can put something together that's going to work nationally. We tried to engage a group that works out of Boston in City Light Vida Urbana, who was doing effective eviction defense and similar type anti-foreclosure work in Boston. So Max and I visualized at the very least an East Coast presence doing this type of work, and it would start to build a little bit of power for it. But City Life had other goals. Their key is really principal reduction and relief on mortgages for people, and Take Back the Land wants to transform relationships to land. So we talk about how the market, as Garson came in to introduce me and was leading us into the introduction, talking about how market affects housing and land. And that's what we say, Take Back the Land. We want the community to be in control of the land. Land as a market commodity does not work for poor and impoverished people. We can never play in that shell game. It's never going to work for poor people. So we propose transforming how we look at land. And that ultimately, in the end, that means capitalism has to fall, right? Because the capitalists are greedy. They live by market rules, and that's the only way they know how to play. So Max and I continued to talk, and in September of 2009, a bunch of activists from the African American community around the states met in Atlanta, and there we came upon the first edict, a call to action for May 1st, 2010, and that's when Take Back the Land National was launched. It was an incredible opportunity for us to really bring people together to engage and work in a dynamic fashion in a way that hadn't been seen in the U.S. in about 30 years. From that first round, from that first call to action in May 2010, we had several successful actions, and particularly in places in the U.S. that we thought we would. We were looking to have a big impact in urban areas, New York, Chicago, Detroit, LA. Our biggest bang for the buck was in places like Portland, Oregon, Madison, Wisconsin, where folks took over a house and led the 6 o'clock news for like a week. That was the story on the 6 o'clock news in Madison. A gentleman by the name of Keith Turner in Toledo, Ohio, him and his friend sealed themselves in the house so they couldn't be evicted. And they did it with cinder block and cement, and the FBI and police had to drill them out of there. It took them like 2 days to get them out. And then it was incredible. They wanted to know, who is this Take Back the Land? And they're holding up one of our documents. Where'd you get this propaganda? And they were really freaking out about it. And we knew we called attention to people at a pretty high level. So to fast forward a little bit, this work started to progress. The U.S. Social Forum came up, and we presented at the Social Forum. That's where a lot of USACI was formed out of that. Take Back the Land presented, and one group that met us in Take Back the Land was a young man by the name of Ryan Acuff that went to school in Rochester, New York, and was very interested in the work that we were doing at Take Back the Land and wanted to know how he could have a local action group in Rochester. So in October of that year, I went up to Rochester and engaged. They had very quietly learned from what we were talking about at the Social Forum and took over a couple of houses in Rochester that were foreclosed and were moving street homeless people into them. And it was a sense of community. It was self-governed. People had to work together to keep the house going. People had chores. But they were running into a problem where people were being evicted, and they wanted to know how to handle it. At the same time, CNN was constantly calling Take Back the Land to look, to video one of these movements. We had raised the consciousness of people, some progressive media outlets were paying attention, but CNN was being persistent. And while we didn't mind having our story elevated, the one thing about mainstream media is they don't always tell it right? So Max and I, Max Rameau, the co-founder, we decided we'd spend a month pushing this reporter between the two of us so that we could get it filmed the way we want and tell the story the way we want. It ended up that we had indie media film this particular movement, and she could interview. So we didn't want any CNN cameras to be around because we wanted tight screen shots on the house. We wanted it filmed a specific way. We didn't want the couple to be shown. This was supposed to go to CNN's blog, but as we watch the story, I'll tell you how it ended up afterwards. So.
I am an ordinary American citizen who is trying to provide for his family, trying to keep a roof over his head, and trying to be a positive part of a community. I haven't had work for almost a year and a half. My unemployment has run out. I've been looking for jobs. I go to temp agencies, and I put in a lot of effort to do a job search, but I'm eventually, at this point, looking at homelessness.
I get disability. I get a standard disability check every month. He works temp agencies. He's making minimum wage at the most. And both of our incomes combined, it's shrinking. I mean, it's just not enough anymore. I mean, a year and a half, almost 2 years, he's been looking for a job. They're not there. So what would you really expect us to do when you're facing eviction and homelessness? Okay? And thank God that Take Back Land is there, because this gives us enough time to work and do what we need to do to build ourselves up again.
Take Back the Land Rochester is a community organization, and which is part of a larger movement which is seeking to make housing a human right and to have community control over housing and land, and by means of taking direct action, provide directly for people. So, for instance, moving families into foreclosed homes to liberate them to be used for people, and not just for the banks, not just for profit. In Rochester, we have over 2,000 vacant homes that are just sitting there while we have people losing their homes. We have thousands of homeless people, so we want to match people's homes with homeless people.
So we're going to one of those places, and we're going to try to recover there. We're going to watch the place become a positive part of the community. And, I actually think we'll become an asset, because with all the empty houses around, vandalism is an option. People that don't care about, the property will go to the house and we'll take care of it. And when it becomes time to go off independently, we'll do that.
Our primary concern is not what's legal and illegal, but what's moral and immoral. I think it's immoral for people to be out on the street when there's thousands of houses that are still in good condition that could be used for people. We want to make sure that through these dramatic actions, so one, we actually fill a need, support people that are going through hard time and that need a house, and also dramatize the issue of housing and how housing is affecting our community. And we're having one of the worst, most severe economic and housing crisis of our generation.
I'm out there every day fighting for my family, fighting for my right to live in a decent place. It's a quality of life issue. I'm out there every day doing anything and everything possible to make ends meet, okay? I don't want to be given anything from anybody. I'm an able-bodied man. I don't drink, I don't do drugs, okay? I have business interests and entrepreneurial interests. I have the desire in my heart to work, but a system that does not provide jobs does not provide me that opportunity.
The fact that you have, like my fiance and her working men to go out there every day to provide for their families. Okay, it is not good enough. But we can't get the correct employment that's paying enough that help us keep a roof over our heads. I mean, it's a little bit sickening. And it's getting worse every day. Nobody cares about that. I have 2 children. What are my 2 children home with me? They just sleep in a park. You know what I'm saying? It's just not right. It's not. And it hurts. Because he tries so hard to take care of us.
A lot of goals and dreams are being destroyed, but there's one thing that I know. Today I have hope. I didn't have that a little while ago. Today I'm one step closer to becoming independent again, maybe gainfully employed with a sustainable wage. Today I'm going to be warm. I'm going to be fed.
So this story, when it was supposed to go on CNN's blog, but as you saw Tammy in the movie started to get emotional, the reporter got emotional right along with her. Ryan Akoff, who you saw was the lead organizer with Take Back the Land Rochester, at one point I turned to him in the interview and gave him a high five and said, this will be on CNN National tomorrow. And sure enough, that's the featured story that was on CNN National, because, and it was important to us because we realized that we could tell our story our way to the press if we managed the process. And that's what we did. Max and I we basically saw the interest in the salivation in this reporter wanting this story. But if you want it, you're going to do it our way. And we were determined to do that, and we eventually got a story out there. Take Back the Land Rochester became one of our most powerful local action groups. I will also add I had to make several trips up to Rochester. I was close to Max Remote lives in Washington, D.C. And a lot of folks know where Take Back the Land National is not an organization. We just bring local action groups together. So we don't have funding. The work that we do, we reach in our pockets. And when we were going up to Rochester, Max and I were struggling a little bit with our own lives, but it was a phone call. Max, how much money do you have? I got $80 I can throw in the pot. Okay, I got $100 I can throw in the pot. That'll get me a round trip bus ticket. I'll go. You know what I mean? That's the way we did it. And this became one of our strongest local action groups. And later, the following year, in March 2010, they alerted us about Catherine Lennon, a grandmother who was leading a family of 11 who was about to be evicted from her home by Bank of America. Her mortgage was sold to Bank of America when Countrywide went bust, which was the biggest mortgage provider in the U.S., but filed for bankruptcy and was taken over or bought through a government-sponsored deal by Bank of America. Catherine's husband had passed away. He was the breadwinner in the family, and she had a tough time keeping up with the mortgage. And they went ahead with eviction proceedings and sent an eviction notice that she was going to be evicted in late March 2011. Ryan and company called and said that they were going to do an eviction defense and wanted our support. And Max and I, having some strong ties with the progressive press like Al Jazeera English and Democracy Now! In New York, started making the calls and started calling our allies to be on alert. Meanwhile, the last Monday in March of that year, I think the date was the 25th, the marshal was supposed to come and Take Back the Land Rochester, had 100 allies surround the house, and sent a message. So the way you get evicted in the States is a marshal comes to your property, physically, or tells you have to leave, and then puts a padlock that only he has the key to on the door, and puts a sticker on the door that this property has been repossessed. But when the marshal drove up and saw 100 people around the house, he figured he was outnumbered 100 to 1. Time for him to leave, and he packed his stuff, left. The next day, what happens is a moving van comes and takes your personal belongings and carts them away to put them in storage. The moving van comes with 2 drivers. The moving van sees 100 people out there and says, we're outnumbered 100 to 2. We're out. They left. So the eviction defense went on through the week. The following Monday, the city of Rochester sent a SWAT team with about 25 police cars to physically remove Catherine from the house. It made serious press and made some international press, and we'll show a little bit of video on that right now.
Well, right now, some of the protesters here are trying to have a little bit of words to say to some of the city officials. They're saying that they could have waited on this till April 5th. But what I want to tell you is that one of the neighbors said, this is not America. This is not what America should be. The house in question is number 9 Ravenwood. It's right down the street here. What happened was Kathy Leonard, her husband died a couple of years ago without a will, so the ownership of the property's kind of been in limbo. She has been working the channels trying to get ownership and thought she had a deal worked out, but she says, and neighbors say, that the agreement with Fannie Mae, which is that federal housing agency that's been the subject of controversy, that they did not wait. And the marshals showed up, the city marshals showed up this morning with all these police officers, and the group called Take Back the Land Rochester that's been staging an eviction watch here for the last week and a half. About 5 of their members were arrested for civil disobedience. They tried to blockade the front of the house. The picture that you just saw of the woman being arrested, a neighbor in pajamas, she was put in handcuffs to be taken down to the police station for just standing on the sidewalk just minutes after I spoke to her.
I have been wrongly justified. These people let me think that they were going to negotiate with me. They came and ambushed me today. My neighbors, everybody's going to jail right now. I don't know what's going on. I'm sick. I don't feel too good. These people ambushed me. I don't know where I'm going. This gentleman said he's going to try to find me somewhere to stay. I don't know what's going on, but I had a home right here that I lived in for years.
It's one of these things that the advocates for the housing say is happening all across the country with this controversy involving Fannie Mae and foreclosing on people's homes. What they're concerned about, Rebecca, is that this home is going to be empty now. It had a family living in it. She was able to make the payments, but the government agency wouldn't accept the payments from her. Now the neighbors are worried that this house might fall into the wrong hands. It might be boarded up, maybe drug dealers, and it's a neighborhood that they have been working very hard to rescue. It is near Thurston Road and Charlie Avenue. It's a very nice neighborhood, and the house looks like it was kept up pretty well, Rebecca.
Well, it sounds like there's still a lot to be worked out on that story, so all right, thanks a lot.
Can I just add one thing? They have been working with Louise Slaughter's office, but maybe getting her involved here a little too late. But Dana Miller, who is a city councilman, lives on the next street over, and neighbors say that he's been sympathetic, but legally his hands apparently are tied by this court-ordered eviction.
So Louise Slaughter is a congresswoman from that area that represents that area, and while she stepped into the picture, we don't think that she acted in good faith a lot and helped us to negotiate or have an upper hand with Fannie Mae and some of the government agencies that were facilitating this particular situation. So we put our heads together and we decided to reach out. As you all know, Garson and I work with a group called the USA-Canada Alliance of Inhabitants, and that's a sister organization to a larger worldwide anti-eviction group called the International Alliance of Inhabitants. And I called Cesare Odolini, the leader of that group, and I explained to Cesare what was going on. And he said, Rob, a bunch of us are meeting tonight. Give us tonight to figure out, a way to support you guys. So they came back tonight. Well, actually that night he sent me an email and said, we're going to indulge in a call campaign where we're going to have members from the IAI from around the world called the two New York senators with a simple question and asked, why is Catherine Lennon being evicted from 9 Ravenswood Avenue in Rochester, New York? And it caught the New York senators off guard. They're getting these calls from these places all around the world, and everybody asking the same question. So it forced them to get involved. It really lifted up the profile. That piece of video that you saw with the woman getting arrested, when we put a little message, we did a blog post, and Take Back the Land in 4 days got 100,000 hits on the website. We've never gotten that kind of traffic before. It really engaged in some interest worldwide, nationally and worldwide, and really got us a lot of recognition. But the issue was, what about Catherine Lennon and her family? What's going to happen to them? So we supported as an institution. We garnered some donations, and we were able to put Catherine in a motel for a while with the help of some people who were sympathetic to our cause, knowing that we weren't an organization that had any money, but folks helped us out. But we went back to Catherine Lennon and said, Catherine, what do you want to happen? And Catherine said she wants her house back, right? So we put our heads together, and we decided to come up with a new piece of video, and it was a Mother's Day present to Catherine Lennon, right? We decided on Mother's Day 2011 to move Catherine Lennon back into our home. And we did it in a very public movement, inviting the police and other officials to the scene. So
well, it is not a sit-in, it's called a live-in. Forcibly evicted from her foreclosed home, a Rochester woman has moved back in. Catherine Lennon is now squatting in her old house, and she's doing it to send a message about foreclosures. Rachel Barnhart has the latest chapter on this story.
I don't have too much of anything, but
Catherine Lennon is back.
I'm living just almost like when we first got it, on the floor.
Forcibly evicted from her foreclosed house in the 19th Ward in March, on Sunday, Lennon moved right back in. She's now a squatter in the house that used to be hers.
It was very easy access. Very easy access.
Lennon claims she's a victim of a Western New York foreclosure mill that's under federal scrutiny. But lender Bank of America said it has tried to work with her.
They more or less forgot about me. They robo-signed on me. They did all of this stuff for me. That's why I'm here now.
Lennon has the support of her neighbors and the group Take Back the Land Rochester. Take Back the Land has broken into several vacant houses in the city, moving in homeless people. This is one of the houses 13 Wham was allowed to enter last year. The occupants were evicted months later. Take Back the Land is hoping Lennon's case will be different.
We already have thousands of vacant homes in Rochester. Why create another vacant home? All the neighbors support her.
Since her eviction, Lennon says the bank offered her the house for $50,000, but would not provide financing. Lennon knows she's risking another eviction, especially since she's making her trespass public. But she wants to make a point.
Let them come and do what they got to do. Maybe this will get the message out. Maybe all of this stuff will help people.
In Rochester, Rachel Barnhart, 13 Wham News.
So that got a lot of recognition, again, nationwide and around the world. And Catherine Lennon today is living in our home, and I'll fast forward a little bit for the sake of time. We really forced the issue. Bank of America had to come into court to prove ownership of the house, and they worked with a robo-signing firm called Stephen J. Baum, who went bankrupt earlier in the year. And one of the first cases that Bank of America asked Stephen J. Baum's name to be taken off of was Catherine Lennon's, because it was very public. And we had really raised the consciousness of people by engaging in a public campaign against Bank of America. We got a Supreme Court judge to force Bank of America to come into court. And they kept asking for adjournments because the judge said, show the paperwork that you own it. If you're evicting people, prove us with the paperwork. And they couldn't come with the note. So we kind of knew that was Bank of America asking us, what do you want? And as I said, what we want to Take Back the Land is community control over land and housing. We wanted Catherine's house turned over to a community land trust. And Catherine would be the only, her family would be the only ones living in the house, but the community would make decisions on it. It would be the model that we hope to set around the country. Bank of America wanted no parts of that because they knew the vault would be open and we'd start snatching houses from around the country. So they worked out a deal with us. They turned this house over to Catherine Lennon for absolutely nothing. We were supposed to zip our lips, but we got very public with it. The deal is done. Everything is signed. So today, Catherine Lennon, we realized to Take Back the Land that we made some missteps, and now we've taken a step back and we're really working with some folks in the legal community some folks in the academic community to really figure out where that misstep was. We kind of think it was the link in the legal community. One of the things that happens is if you don't have a legal advocate that is taking your message into the courtroom, you're going to run into some brick walls, right? So downstate in New York, we have strong connections with a lot of legal advocates, but Empire Legal Services was the law firm that was working with Catherine at the time, and Catherine wasn't forceful enough with this law firm to say what she actually wanted. She just wanted to be in her home, and she didn't really get the messaging that we were trying to send. So we understand we have to do a better job of educating those directly affected and politicizing them, but at the same time, understanding that these law firms have to take the message of the people directly affected into the courtroom. You're there to service them. So we have to be careful with the folks we engage in the legal community, which is now I've undertaken around the states to start working with law schools around the country to engage them. Harvard Law School, Yale Law School, University of Miami, Northeastern Law School, Northwestern. So there are a lot of law schools that are putting together these community lawyering programs to support us and support our work. And we hope as Take Back the Land catches on, folks need capacity to do this work. There's a lot of risk involved, but we've also realized that if you support these groups, you're getting the support of community, you're getting progressive press into the mix. So a lot of times when it comes to housing takeovers and this type of work, Al Jazeera English is constantly calling me a match for leads, right? And they'll put our story out there the right way, so it's getting worldwide recognition as we do this work. So it's been an incredible ride. I want to take some time now and stop and hope you guys have questions for me. It's been an incredible ride doing this work. I will say to you that Garson told you I have connections with folks around the world, and that has been a blessing for me. When you get an email from folks in Budapest, Hungary saying they need your support, or this morning I got an email from the European Squatters Collective and folks in France who are in a squat right now with 14 families, and they're emailing me in the United States to garner support and solidarity for their movement. That's huge. That means our voices are being heard, and we're building that global power that we need to build to make social change. Garson and I have been part of an email chain with a contingent of folks going to the World Urban Forum in Tunis, and there's been a lot of conversation about getting our voices out there heard. So I think the collaboration and collective power is starting to resonate with people, and people are understanding this is the only way we're going to make social change. Finally, before I take questions, I'll just say the model of Take Back the Land, and I'll go into this more on the weekend with those that are engaging with me in the weekends about tactics, is nonviolent civil disobedience has to be at the top of what we call the SPARE model of organizing. And if you think of an arrow at that point, that's where it all starts, with direct action. And then a lot of other things fall into place with that. And those other things are alternative structures, facilitation and collaboration, having conversations like this in forums like this, working with the legal community, and building strategic partnerships. That's been instrumental to getting the work of Take Back the Land out there far and wide. You get the buy-in of other entities. So our legal partners are the Center for Constitutional Rights in New York, which is a big legal outfit doing work all around the world. The National Law Center on Homelessness and Poverty, NESRI, the Advancement Project out of Washington, the U.S. Human Rights Network. These are all folks that support the work of the Take Back the Land movement. So with that, I'm hoping you guys have questions for me. It would be great if you guys could step up to this mic if you do have a question. We want to get this on film if possible. And anything I've said, and at the bottom, and this is a line that always kind of ruffles a little bit of feathers, the message that we try to get to resonate with folks is capitalism doesn't work for poor people, right? So eventually, when I talk about community control of land and alternative structures, what I'm saying in the long term is capitalism needs to fall. Capitalism doesn't work. It's based on greed, and greed doesn't speak to value system that a community needs to have to support one another, right? It erodes the very core of a value system, right? And as I spoke in the class earlier today, those values are transparency in government, universality, something that works for all of us. Accountability in government. When you make decisions, you need to be held accountable for them. Participation, allow us into the process. And equity, it has to work for all of us and bring value to all of us equally. So that's a key part of it, having values. And that doesn't work in a capitalist society, right? Greed is about me. I want all that I can get and I get more, and no matter who's at stake, I'll crush you to get what I want, right? Greed is a hard thing to bring down. That's the other challenge. It's not going to be easy to change this, right? Greed is something that's powerful. People who are greedy won't let it go. They never get enough. They're never satisfied. And corporations and the capitalists in this world are greedy. That's the bottom line. Question? Any questions? Anybody? Come on. Nothing resonated with you guys? Famous for walking up to people and asking them if they have human rights. They look at us with these strange, bemused looks, right? What do you mean, do you have human rights? But I just want to quickly read Article 25. This is something I never learned in school, and this was signed off by the United States and the other countries in the UN in 1948. Article 25 reads, everyone has the right to a standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of himself and of his family, including food, clothing, housing, and medical care, and necessary social services, and the right to security in the event of unemployment, sickness, disability, widowhood, old age, or other lack of livelihood in circumstances beyond his control. Motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and assistance. All children, whether born in or out of wedlock, shall enjoy the same social protections. I would argue that many of our governments have yet to live up to that article. You know, I think they failed miserably in living up to that article. Sir?
Two questions, I guess, both on New York. One is, what happened? And how do you get money? I saw you rented trucks and film equipment and all that.
So, yeah, it's been an incredible, with respect to collaboration. So I don't know how familiar you are with what's going on in Brooklyn, or what's going on around the city with gentrification. But in Brooklyn, in downtown Brooklyn, a very wealthy developer has redeveloped an area of downtown Brooklyn. I'm trying to think of his name now. I'm just blank with the name right now. His first name is Bruce, but he built this new arena for the Nets basketball team. And his brother is on the board of the Center for Constitutional Rights. And the wealthy developer redeveloped downtown Brooklyn, and his brother donated $75,000 to take back the land. So to me, it was like, you're saying, I don't like what you're doing. You know, it might cause some family problems if I talk about it directly, but I'm going to give money to this group who really does the opposite of what you're trying to do. I always said I'd love to be at Thanksgiving dinner table with that family because there are some issues there. But I think, Garson, to finish off the first part of your question, there's a lot of collaboration, right? So not an alternative, it's not a group that has a lot of money, but there are groups that step up and offer donations at the time when we start making public what it is we're about to do. So folks come together and they figure it out. They hold fundraisers, they hold parties at bars, and we get the resources needed to do that work through collaboration. The second part of your question was again?
What happened?
Well, what happened in the end with the takeover? So in the end of that, there were 10 of us arrested. 2 of them were Episcopal priests and collars. One you saw was Frank Morales, who was actually helping construct this up. And Frank is a longtime squatter in New York City on the Lower East Side. Famous. Nobody knows more about squatting than Frank. Frank happens to be on his way right now, as I'm standing here, to France in support of the European Squatters Collective and the Jeudi Noir squat. Right, so Frank is going to be there. You saw part of that email chain. 10 of us were arrested, but there was some very high tension in the New York City Police Department around that arrest. Number one, it was a high-profile arrest because we had a local city council member on the scene trying to negotiate between myself and the New York City Police. I had no problems with a certain Deputy Inspector Caban, who I talked to you that I built a relationship with. But Chief Obelli was number 3 in the New York City Police Department at the time, and he was coming down trying to flex his muscles, and he really, for lack of a better way, thought we were chumps, right? Like we weren't prepared. So he's standing facing me at one point, and it's getting very tense as he's telling Caban to shut down this demonstration, and Caban is ignoring him. And he comes to me and he looks me in the face and says, I have an affidavit in my pocket right now that says Chase wants you off this property. So I guess he thought I was any Tom, Dick, and Harry off the street. And I know an affidavit is not going to work. You have to have a court order signed by a judge to say he wants you off this property. So he didn't even have time to go into court. So the backdrop is we're talking is a public housing unit. So I figured a good way to insult him, I looked at him and I said, who signed it? The tenants of 14F? It doesn't mean a damn thing to me. And he got bright red. He was so frustrated with me, and it kept going back and forth. He kept hurling barbs at me, but at one point, the tension, it got so tense in the scene that he had a police in a megaphone tell us for like the 5th time that if we don't come off the property, we're going to be arrested. And the cop, if you were to look at the whole video, is making the announcement in the video, and he got so frustrated because he realized nobody's listening to me. And he just put it down, like he was frustrated. But at the same time, Caban was walking in front of the property with his hands behind his back, like he was actually being arrested. And I said, this is tense, folks. This is the showdown time. So that's when we all got into the space and we decided, you're just going to have to take us out of here. And eventually they arrested us, but it was very high profile with the crowd yelling, you're arresting priest, what's the matter with you? There were 2 priests in collars. We get to the precinct that night and there was a serious tension inside the police precinct where Chief O'Belly was barking orders at a lot of Caban's men from the 25th precinct. You'll hear me say 25 a lot, it means the 25th precinct. It caused a dividing line and some tension internally in the New York City Police Department. The guys who worked for Caban directly will only follow the orders of Caban, and this says a lot about insubordination and structure in the police department. They were, for all intents and purposes, ignoring O'Belly, who was the higher level. He was number 3 in the New York City Police Department. He had to actually go out and recruit cops from other precincts around the city to process our arrest. The cops in the precinct wouldn't do it. There was one funny moment in the precinct that night where a member of Picture the Homeless, Gene Rice, an older gentleman, a cop comes downstairs and they say, who's Rob Robinson? And Gene Rice goes, uh-oh, they're going to beat the shit out of Rob. You know, the guy called me out and he wanted to talk to me. And the guy said simply, Deputy Inspector Caban sent me down here to tell you he's got no problem with you or your organization. He wanted you to know that the orders to lock you up came from O'Belly. So when you start the rhetoric in the press, put his name out. That's basically what he's telling us. And we engaged in a very public campaign to tell why we took over the space, what we were trying to accomplish. In the end, J.P. Morgan Chase wouldn't prosecute. We went to court the following October. That event took place in July. Our court date was October 21st that year. We came to court, the 10 of us, and there must have been 150 supporters out there from the community, a big band called Rude Mechanical Orchestra, who just makes crazy noise out on the street. They were out there performing, and it was such a high-profile arrest. J.P. Morgan Chase wanted no part of it, and they told us, don't even come in the courtroom, the case is dismissed, all charges are dropped. So it ended up, we sent a strong message, but that really elevated the profile of this type of work in New York City, and it's just become stronger and stronger. What has happened now with certain groups out there are folks afraid of oppression and police oppression, and they've taken to squatting, but they've changed the name of squatting to homesteading to try to soften it. And so Take Back the Land often bumps heads with these folks because we like to be very public with our work. And squatting traditionally is something that's done covertly, right? People don't want to be public about how and why. So it's been very difficult for Take Back the Land and its type of work to take hold in New York. So often my work as organizing happens more around the country. There's more work I do around the country, Max and I, than we do actually in New York City. It's been an incredible way that this has all played out with respect to the city.
Thank you, Rob. I really appreciate what you've done.
Thank you.
I was reading the Regina, we have a manifesto. The Regina Manifesto was written in 1933. And what it is about is exactly what you're talking about. The problem that I see is the impetus to actually do something. Everybody works in silos and they don't get together. And I don't know how we could get around that. Anyway, I'm looking forward to Saturday.
Okay, well, some ideas, and I'll just go over this briefly. I talked to some students. I think collaboration is important, right? That word you use is a word I use repeatedly in my work. We tend to organize in silos, and traditionally in the States, because of foundation money, right? So foundations dictate the way work looks and the work that happens. I think community should be at the front of that work and how it happens. And that may mean funding resourcing ourselves in different ways, right? Traditionally, we depend on foundation money to do the work. I would argue that religious institutions have done some great social justice work for years and never relied on foundation money. So we have to think different. The other thing I would like to offer here, and maybe Carson can help me put this in place, is one of the things that's been instrumental to the work of Take Back the Land and other groups that I work with is the collaboration with other movements around the world. And that can happen with the technology that we have in place today. Something as simple, we started out with Skype, right? But if you put a number of people on Skype, you got to pay for it. Google Hangout has changed all of that, right? So I'm a regular Google Hangout user. I'm on Google Hangout with the shack dwellers from the South African Abashali movement on a regular basis. With the folks, the Avaris Mendenke, the homeless movement in Budapest, Hungary. And we're sharing strategies and tactics. That needs to happen. We need to create a global movement. So if that is somehow, we can set up some type of Google Hangout with activists and community-based organizations here in Regina, I would love to help out in any way I can. That is what has lifted up my voice, the voices of the organization and the people I work with, right? Collaboration, people coming together. That's how you build the true collective power that you need for social change. Any other questions? Yeah.
I'm just wondering, when you're choosing who Take Back the Land is willing to support, is there like a criteria that has to be met? How do you choose who you're going to move into housing?
Right, so, well, we don't dictate, so the Take Back the Land Leadership Committee, which is myself, Max Rameau, who was the original founder of Take Back the Land, and M. Adams from Take Back the Land, Madison, Wisconsin. We make up the leadership committee, and we engage community groups that are primarily made up of people of color that are directly affected by the issue, and who have share the same political ideology that we do, right? And just have the same beliefs that we do, and have to believe in our objectives and goals. How they do the work, we don't try to dictate. We leave that to that particular community organization. What we try to do is offer as much support as we can. So it's up to the particular group, the community group, however they do their decision making, to decide on a family. Rochester started out, and that's one of our strongest groups, by just wanting to work with homeless populations who were on the street and had no other alternative and no place to go. And that evolved into working with people going through foreclosure and facing eviction. So it depends on the community groups how those decisions are being made. Early on with Take Back the Land Miami, of which Max was, they had a loose definition of family, so there were two big criteria. You had to be a family, and you had to have the ability to sustain certain things coming into, so like electricity and water coming into the house, you had to be able to maintain that, because we didn't want to take over housing and people not have those basic services and then say, look, these people are moving people in the house and they can't even afford water, they can't afford electricity. So you have to be, at minimum, be able to be able to put those products on and be able to call yourself a family. We had a loose definition of family in Miami. They didn't hold you to a strict criteria.
Everybody cool if I ask a couple more? I was wondering if you could talk about just sort of when you're physically on site doing a takeover of housing or a housing block, what your sort of like your day or your whole process is, and if you remember after that, what do you guys do to ensure these people are able to maintain that housing? Because I've got to think occasionally people, have to come back, like banks, government have to come back when you guys can't be there 24/7, 365 watching out for these people doing sit-ins. How do you ensure that they don't eventually get evicted later on?
Well, I will ensure for the first 90 days we are there, and we maintain a watch. But we figured after 90 days, if the bank hasn't reacted, they're not going to physically move. The other thing we do is we engage in a lot of rhetoric with the police department. So our messaging says to the police department, and this started with Catherine Lennon, why are you using public money to defend private property? And that changes it, right? So What we did by moving Catherine Lennon back into our house on Mother's Day was send a message that if you constantly do an eviction, we're going to constantly do a move-in. And effectively, if you send a SWAT team to every eviction, we'll bankrupt your police department. So what do you want to do here? And the city of Rochester caught onto it quick. So like 2 days later, after that Mother's Day move-in, there's a very funny interaction with Catherine and one of the local policemen who was riding by in the area. He actually stopped the car as Catherine was cleaning up the front yard and said, "Hi, Mrs. Lennon, how are you? How is everything going?" You know, all of a sudden it changed, right? From a guy who was coming to put her in handcuffs 2 days ago to a guy that's just totally respecting her. So the message resonated. So that's the challenge. But the day is very unusual. I think it's different in different situations. I kind of myself like to be away from the group because I relish or I cherish the job of police negotiator. So I like the intensity of that, and I get sort of a game face on like an athlete. So when we did the December Day National Day of Actions in Brooklyn, New York, I was a police negotiator, and I knew they were going to move 1,000 people to the street. I got in the area about 8 o'clock. The action wasn't going to happen till 11. I just wanted a feel for the neighborhood. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I'm standing and eating a pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream to calm myself down. And it was in the winter, it was December 6th. I'm standing on the street with a pint of Haagen-Dazs. Like, you know, you get nervous, you try to calm yourself down, and ice cream has that calming effect for me, I guess. But, you know, everybody laughs. There's a great picture of me, like, just standing there eating Haagen-Dazs. There were some other photographers in the area. But personally, I like to scout out the area. I take the role very seriously. I want to separate myself from the crowd. Everybody has a role, so we meet at a central location. Everybody's roles are rehearsed and gone over. You know, everybody has to understand their roles. And then we all move out in different groups. And then depending on what your role is in that action, you flow with a different crew. Like some folks are security, some folks are responsible for food. Every job is important, right? So when you do an action like taking over the fence, the Food Not Bombs folks came in and they fed the entire neighborhood that day. Right? So it's kind of hard for the police to press on somebody who's feeding an entire neighborhood. They get all messed up, right? They're stuck. You know, we can't just come in here like gangbusters. People are filming. They're going to see police jumping on a whole bunch of people eating. So, you know, it's really thought through and practiced and gone over. And the day of, you know, is one last rehearsal. You meet about 3 hours before you move out. Not an alternative is great because they'll come dressed for the part, like you saw the model photo shoot. When we took over the building the first time, they came as construction people. I didn't even know who they were. Nobody ever told me that they were coming. So they came up. They were all dressed in construction gear with helmets on. They put cones out on the street, blocked off the sidewalk, and all had like tool belts on and started drilling these big posters on the wall with messages on them. I'm like, what? You know, and then somebody said, that's not an alternative, they're helping us. And I'm like, okay, nobody told me, but it was, they had me fooled. Like, I'm calling all the security guys. Who are this construction crew? Anybody knew construction was going on in this building? You know, they were dressed to the nines, male, female, everybody played the role. So people assimilate into a role and take it serious. You know, some groups do it better than others. In Picture the Homeless, we became pretty good at it. We had good trainers from Take Back the Land, and we became pretty good at it. Not an alternative is good at creating the art, so again, that collaboration is always important.
Awesome, thank you.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Joy.
I guess my question is, I know that housing is a universal issue, and that's something that you talk about with Nesri. How do you universalize the issue to get people engaged in it and create that sense of community that gets 100 neighbors together to stand on a property and say this is wrong? I mean, there's no simple answer, obviously, but just some advice on how to create an action.
So I think, and I totally understand where you're coming from. So like, I don't want this to pretend for this to be any easier than it was. I think the city of Chicago and the group, the Chicago Anti-Eviction Campaign, does this the best. So the way you're going to be successful is by bringing different members of the community together. And when I say that, I mean the single-family homeowner, the people living in apartments, the public housing residents, right, and the homeless. They all have to be brought into the mix and buy into the process. So that's creating forums that people can come and talk about their issues. Often we're divided, right? As you know, I grew up in suburban Long Island in New York, so before my transformation of going homeless, I certainly didn't know all that people faced in public housing and some of the challenges. And honestly, I wasn't too compassionate for the homeless, right? Because I was one of the people that painted them in that box. You have these issues and you're not taking care of what you're supposed to take care of, and that's why you're in the situation you're in. So you learn that people have to come together, right? And you have to create forums where people can talk about what they're going through and sympathize with one another and feel that things are similar, right? Just because I'm a single family homeowner doesn't make me any more deserving than the people living in public housing. The fact that we're human, we all deserve a safe, comfortable place to live. And that's the framing that you have to put it in, and that's what human rights framing allows you to do. It's a challenge, Joy. It's not easy. It's working with different factions of the community. Bringing the faith community in the fold is probably your biggest ally, and is going to move the flocks of people, if you will, from the different sectors into that one central space and help you do what it is you want to do.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Vic.
I know you talked earlier about conflict between police. I'm just wondering if you could expand more on how you play to the humanity and the emotions of like regular police when they come to your site.
So one of the biggest things you have to do, and New York City police have a history of really oppressing people and forcing you to get agitated so they can react. So you really have to stay within yourself and not allow yourself to get agitated. So don't take anything they say personally. I generally will say to people, be Teflon. Don't let anything they say stick to you, and keep your voice flatline. The legal community in New York has always given me credit for not allowing myself to get agitated, and the New York City police don't know what to do. They're stuck. So they end up dialoguing with me on the street corner for like 12 hours, right? It's a lot of money, a lot of time. And the other thing is, if you, in certain cities, understanding the dynamics of the city, so one thing I know in New York City is if you bring 100 people to a scene or to an action and make it appear as if it's what New York City calls a riot or a level 1 disturbance, they will release a certain team, a special response team that costs $250,000 to release, right? So if you can raise the ruckus to a level and not be violent and initiate that kind of police response, questions get asked of the police department, why are you spending that kind of resource on a non-violent action? Why are you initiating a level 1 disturbance when it doesn't look like anybody's being violent? So it causes this internal conflict while you can stand back and continue their work. I think the other thing to do is put a human side to it. So as we go through this non-violent civil disobedience, this particular deputy inspector, I always said to the members of Picture the Homeless that they come from the same communities we come from. They're human beings just like us. And I do think they have feelings and emotions despite what community activists and others will say. So the one thing I noticed about Command is we were delivering our message. It seemed to resonate with him. So I always said he has an Aunt Mary who maybe lives in Ohio someplace, who went through this foreclosure stuff, and he understands how her life was thrown in upheaval behind it. And he sympathizes with the people out of here that are being non-violent and saying the system has to change. It resonated with him. You have to take that shot. They're people too. Despite what we might think, there are ways to infiltrate them and their way of thinking. They come from the same place as we do. So it's about sharing this knowledge, right? So there were a lot of people that would challenge me in New York City, saying, oh, you got lucky this one time, they're not going to oppress you. But I think the time when we did the Occupy Our Homes December 6th Day of Actions in 2011, that's when New York City woke up and said, you know what, if you work with the police in a certain way, they're not going to vamp on you. And it changes it. You know, it's always this stuff, you know, there was these verbal bombs thrown between community activists and the police. And it's just insightful. It causes them to react to you. So don't go there. I mean, you know, it's not rocket science. It's just some common sense thinking.
And my other question was, has the police commissioner or anybody higher up ever like brought you in to try to talk to you to sort of like preemptively see what you're eventually going to try to do, or?
No, they refuse. So the one thing good about it, and I've told a lot of you, the one thing we do at Take Back the Land, we don't want to talk to the folks that we think got us into the position we are. So traditionally, there is some tension between community-based groups and local organizations. So what we would do if we ever got to that position as Take Back the Land is we would have one of our strategic partners have the dialogue, specifically the Center for Constitutional Rights, which has a habit of challenging taking New York City police to court. So that just, it just causes more tension. And you don't mind that tension with the police commissioner, he's sitting in his lofty office. He needs to perspire a little bit, right? But he also needs to understand that these community organizations aren't just run wild anarchists and people willing to get arrested. They have some reasons. They form these partnerships, and there's a trust built between them and their strategic partners, right? So we make it clear at Take Back the Land, and even Picture the Homeless is starting to get this. We don't want to have a conversation with, with Robert Kelly in New York. We will have the Center for Constitutional Rights have a conversation with you because we believe they understand the letter of the law better than we do, and we trust them because of our relationship.
Hi, Rob. I was just wondering if Take Back the Land has had any success in like rural areas or like smaller towns. I actually live like 3 hours north of Rochester, and if the successes and challenges have been different from, say, Chicago.
Well, actually, yeah. So, I think our biggest success to date, we would say, was Madison, Wisconsin. We never expected to have the kind of reaction there. I mean, when they did that takeover in 2010, it led to 6 o'clock news in Madison every night. There was like press, out there every night. So it was a huge success. What happens is, to really make this work effective, you have to have capacity to do sustained action. So you really have to send a message. So it's a little bit challenging, but we would say if we were to assess our successes, we've had more success in rural areas than we did in urban areas, right? We've always expected to have the success in urban areas. One of the other biggest successes we had happened to be in Chicago, but that was working with a woman by the name of Martha Biggs, who was evicted from public housing, or as folks here call it, social housing, and we moved her into a foreclosed house in Chicago. She's still in that house today. We wanted to negotiate with the bank, but they're so afraid of us. They won't even talk to us, but they won't even send anybody in. They're so afraid of the negative press. So she's been able to exist in that house with her 4 kids and, live happily ever after right now. It's going on 2 years, and in June will be 2 years. So, it's been mixed successes. One rural area, I wouldn't call rural, I would call it more suburban. We had a little bit of trouble with Charlotte, North Carolina. We tried to move a family back into a foreclosed home, but we didn't understand the police down there, right? And it let us know at Take Back the Land that you have to have a community, a group on the ground that you're working directly with. So we work with Occupy Charlotte and Occupy Greensboro, and that proved to be challenging because when the police came, they came in formation like it was the army. They marched up this hill. They knew there were only 4 people in the house, but they sent 50 officers with riot shields, batons, and all kinds of crazy equipment to get 4 people out of the house. So we're like, whoa, what is this? So, we needed to understand better how police react in the South. And this is all learning, right? It's not a perfect science. We learn, and we learn from every situation. The one thing we do is we assess. We take a step back after the action, especially where we haven't been successful, and we do an assessment, and then we figure out how to do it better the next time. Any other questions? If not, I'm going to thank everybody. This has been incredible. I want to particularly thank Garson, who is just, it's not often you find academia, and there's always been this tension between the academic community and community organizers. It seems like the community organizers have some tension with a lot of folks, right? And that's what I find. I find myself saying, look, folks, this has to change. We're not going to win anything. And maybe that's why. Maybe because all that tension exists, right? So as we move forward with this work, Max, my partner in Take Back the Land, and I spend a lot of time, and we try to send a message that collaboration is the only way we're going to make any social change. You have to collaborate, work together. You have to come out of the silos, as you say, of organizing around, I only do housing, I only do labor, I only do education. It's not going to work. And that fracturedness in progressive communities has us losing right now, has us getting crushed. And until we change our mentality and build some collective power that speaks from the ground up, we're not going to see the change that we want to see. I will end by saying there was an incredible experience that we had called Occupy, and I think Occupy took some missteps by not creating spaces for collaboration and conversation. So to have the conversation around race, class, gender, the new term that I'm hearing, adultism, and all of these different things, right? So as somebody who does a lot of civil disobedience, direct action, the occupiers would call me in New York, we're going to do this and we need you to support, we know you have good police negotiating skills. And it was hard for me to get them to understand and say, look, when the police come, right, and there are 25 white college kids and there is Rob and maybe 2 other people of color he was able to recruit, and the police start swinging the sticks, I'm not, number one, I'm not leading this one. I'm not interacting with the police. They're going to see me of color. There's a tradition in the states of police oppressing people of color. They're going to hit me first. They're going to cart me off to jail first. So we need to have that conversation. That's where it took a misstep. But I do think Occupy was great at mobilizing, right? They turned out numbers of people to action. So imagine what a social justice movement we could create if we brought the people that were great at mobilizing with the people from the community that were great at organizing, and they come together and make space to have those conversations. Oh, what change we would see in this world. So it is my dream that that happens one day. But I want to thank you for being here tonight. Thank everybody for inviting me, and thank the University in Goshen for bringing me here. Some of the students are putting a get-together for Saturday, and we'll go into more detail, as Jake was asking me about the specifics, and Greg was alluding to, and we'll go into that detail on Saturday. So I encourage you to come on Saturday. We'll have some video support, and talk about some real experiences and some real actual cases. So thank you.